In this recording, I will explain how you set up assignment 3 according to the instructions in the distributed zip file. I will try to do this in one recording, and you can just follow along, and please watch it once before you try it yourself so you're aware with all of the steps, and let's hope everything works out. So at first you can take a look at the README file in the zip, and you can also watch it on GitLab, and it will be formatted a little bit nicer. So basically this is the setup steps as you see them, and we will start by cloning the assignment repository, your assignment 3 repository. We will unpack the stuff in the zip file that you have downloaded, and you will get a bunch of files. We will do some changes to these files, and then we will add them to the repository, and finally commit and push so you get everything up and running. And then we will also take a look at how you can configure Visual Studio Code to work with this task. In the README file you also have what you should do for the passing grade, and we will take a look at that towards the end also, and what you should do for the higher grades. I will show this in Visual Studio Code and Git Bash. If you use anything else, you're a little bit more on your own, but feel free to post any questions in the course Slack channel, and we will help out as best we can. To get things started, I have downloaded the zip file into a directory where I want my assignment, and I also have started Git Bash in this one, and it's a little bit large here, but that's for you to see what I type. So basically we follow the instructions step by step. So we should clone our assignment repository in a convenient directory, and then you get your assignment 3 directory created. So I have my repository for assignment 3. I want to clone it, so I copy the URL, and then I go to the Git Bash, git clone, and use the URL I get. All right, it's an empty repository, so that's nothing to care about. If we look in the file explorer, we now have our assignment 3 directory, so everything has worked out. Next step. We should unpack the contents of the zip file into the directory, and we can use this command here. So let's just copy it. You can also use an unzip program if you have that, of course. Unzip monopoly.zip into the assignment 3 directory. And we get all of the files, and these files and their positions should correspond to what you have here. So everything should be in the root of the assignment 3 directory. So let's check that we have that. This looks good. So what should we do next? We should change the execution rights for the Gradle wrapper, and this is done with Chmod on Unix operating systems. On Windows we actually don't need to do that, but let's do it anyway. So first we need to step into the assignment 3 directory. And then we run the chmod command and add the execute permissions. All right. Next step is to actually run Gradle and build the whole application. So this should also work without any problems. It can take a while the first time you do it, especially if you don't already have Gradle installed, because then it will need to download and install that for you. But everything should be automatic, and you should see some progress here. If it doesn't work, try to read the error messages and sort out what could have happened, and of course ask questions in the course Slack channel. But this is basically what you should have when everything has run. You should see that it has built successfully. You have a number of files that has been checked for code formatting, and you have a number of files that have been checked for common bug patterns and performance problems patterns. And this is something that is executed automatically when you run, when you build the system. So everything seems to work out here. Next step, we should run the git add command and add all the files. And one final step is that the Gradle will also run on GitLab. So when you push to GitLab, all of the tests and stuff will run. So it's an automatic build pipeline that is executed. So we need also to make sure that the Gradle wrapper can be executed when it is uploaded to GitLab. We can check that everything looks okay. Yes, all of the files are added, no problems. And finally, we can do the initial commit. All right, and push. All right, the setup is more or less done. Let's do the first optional step here and check that everything has been uploaded correctly. My files are added. I have actually the README file visible here right now, so you can take a look at it in your local repository also. One interesting thing connected to the builder pipeline is that we can check what's happening, because now Gradle is running on GitLab and everything is built and tested as we go here. So you can take a look here. You can see that the build is running. The build is done. It's now running the tests also. If we wait a little while, we should be able to see what's happening here also. And now it changed its status. And depending on how many people are running this at the same time, it can take different amounts of time. And sometimes you also need to reload this page to actually see the status update. And let's click the tests here and see, no tests to show. Let's reload it. Yeah, and the tests are done, and now we can see that the tests are executed, and there are 21 tests that are executed right now. Nothing has failed, we have no errors, we have no skipped, we have 21 passed tests, and that's good. You can take a look at the test also. And for example, if you have a test case that is failing, you can take a look at it looking here in GitLab also, if you want to. Then you just click the view details and you will see what the problem is. And this is also something that you will get a report of when you run Gradle in the Git bash or in the console. You will get the error messages that's are problematic, the failed tests. All right, but let's go back to the instructions. So we looked at GitLab, everything has been pushed, and the pipeline is run under the continuous integration, continuous deployment part. We can now also create a release branch, because we will push and commit, so we can create a release branch directly now. So let's do that, just so that we have it done. I do it this way, create new branch. And then we can just create it directly from the master, because we will commit to the master and the master will then be ahead of the release automatically. Now that is done, let's continue. So let's go into Visual Studio Code and make this run in Visual Studio Code also. One thing that you can install, and I think it's a good idea, is to install the Gradle tasks extension. Then you can run Gradle directly from Visual Studio Code, and it will also recognize this as a Java project from the get-go. So I highly recommend that you install Gradle tasks in Visual Studio Code, so everything will run smoothly. When that is done, we can just open a folder, and I will go into my assignment 3 folder, and I will just select that one. And it will ask me if this should be loaded as a Java project, and yes, I want it to be a Java project. All right, it takes a few seconds of loading, I think. You can check the status down there, I guess. But when we are done, you can see that we have the source folder, we have the main source, and here you have the actual code that you are going to work with, the classes that are already there, so to speak. And the main function is in game, the game class. So if we scroll down, you can see that now we have the ability to run let's make it a little bit bigger. Now we have the ability to run here. One thing also is that since we have this coding standard, the Google coding standard to adhere to, the most important change there is really the indentation. So you can go up into the preferences and the settings, and here you find the tab size, and it should be set to 2, and you should also have spaces instead of tabs. So that is something you can fix also. Insert spaces instead of tabs. All right, that is it for Visual Studio Code. Now everything seems to be running here, and if you have installed Gradle, you can also run Gradle from within Visual Studio Code. And here you have the build command, for example, and you can just run it by clicking the play button, and the same things will happen, but inside of Visual Studio Code instead of going out into Git Bash. And that is probably a productive way of working. Let's go back to the steps. We have prepared Visual Studio Code to work in the assignment 3 directory. We have changed the tab settings to become 2 spaces instead, because this is what Google coding standard thinks we should have. All right, that's it for the setup. Everything should now be working, and you can even run the game already, but it will not really work because there are things to fix in it. And what you need to fix is described in this passing grade task here. So you should study the design, and you have that also available. So let's take a look at that. As an MD file, and you can study this, and of course for the reflection of for assignment 2 you should try to compare this to your own design. But we have the class diagram. This is how the classes are connected using associations and dependencies. We apparently have this player interface, and we have a human player, we have a tile, and we have a few subclasses to the abstract tile class here. And one thing to note here is that the tile class works as a circular double linked list. And this is actually what you are supposed to implement and fix in this first part for the passing grade. And to do that, we have automatic test cases to help us. Inside the source test folder, you find the tier 1 test class. And in this class, you have a number of test cases. All of these test cases need to work before you have achieved the passing grade. And to do this, you simply uncomment the first test case. And we can run it directly from Visual Studio Code if you have that set up properly, or you can run it via Gradle in either the console or via Visual Studio Code or your development environment. But let's run this test directly in Visual Studio Code. And we can see that it failed because the implementation is lacking. So basically what you need to do is implement the constructor in tile so that it sets the next and the previous links correctly. And this is for the constructor without any arguments. So let's take a look at the tile class. So this is the tile class, and the first constructor is what you are to implement. So this implementation here is not correct, and what you should do is set this and previous links to point to the object being created, that is using the this keyword, because we have a circular double linked list with only one node in it, and it points to itself. The next node is itself, and my previous node is myself, so to speak. So this should actually be it for the first part. So let's run the test again. And if you don't get any feedback from Visual Studio Code here, you can also click this little check mark here and you will get the test status. So now it has passed, and I'm actually have completed the first test case here. So now we of course need to commit and push this so that we can have progress in our assignment. I have modified the test case in tier 1 tests for, I decommented the test case, and I also fixed the tile constructor. So this should be correct. All right, let's go back into GitLab and see that something happened. The plain constructor is done. We can also see that the release now is one step behind because it does not have the last commit that we did. So this is good. And we can check the pipeline, and we can see that it is running and it has passed. So we can take a look at the details if we want to. We can see that we now have 22 tests that have executed, and we can take a look at the results here are fine because everything is passing, of course. And this is basically how you are supposed to do it. You take one test case at a time, implement it, fix the problems in the implementation, and you add the changes, you commit, and you push. So in this way, you always move the project forward a little bit. But this is more or less up to you. I think I have showed you plenty of what's going on, and you can also of course run it using Gradle in in the console here. And I actually encourage you to do this before you commit, because the test cases, if you run them individually, you don't run them all, and maybe you break something that you have you think you have already fixed when doing some other changes. So it's good to run all the test cases regularly, and of course also these quality tests, so that you don't do anything that is considered bad from a coding standard perspective or best practices perspective. So basically I think this is it, and I hope we will have a good experience with the build system, Gradle, and the continuous integration and things like that. And don't forget, if you have any questions, ask them in the course main channel on Slack, and we will try to sort everything out. Bye for now.